Hello, this is Lord Vyron, and I just finished Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning, Episode 1, The Fateless One, Tyrnok's Revenge, Fall of the Tuatha. Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning is a 2012 action RPG developed by Big Huge Games and the now defunct 38 Studios, and published by EA for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. The game was praised by some for its combat system, intriguing world, and character progression system. I had actually started this game a couple years ago, but for one reason or another stopped after exploring maybe 2 or 3 areas. I just first want to say that this is a big game. I tackled every side quest I could alongside the main story quests and ended up clocking in around 70 or 80 hours. Obviously, if I could sink that kind of time into it, I must have found it pretty fun to play. Gee, imagine that. So you're able to use staffs, scepters, chakrams, longswords, greatswords, warhammers, daggers, special weapons called Feyblades, and bows as weapons. You gain experience by fighting and completing quests, and leveling up allows you to invest in skills like lockpicking, alchemy, which should really just be called chemistry, but whatever, blacksmithing, stealth, and etc. You also get to invest in one of 3 separate specialty trees, starting with weapon proficiencies, but also branching into special attacks and powers. The maximum level is 40, and you receive 3 points to invest in specialties per level, giving you just enough to max out most of one tree plus a weapon from another. Each combination of different specialties can be used to unlock a special destiny, which gives certain bonuses and new abilities. I primarily use daggers and bows for my playthrough, filling out the finesse tree with extra points put into using a longsword at the end, with some dabbling in Feyblades. An odd thing I noticed when playing this, especially right after Dragon's Dogma, is how much these two games are so disparate in their approaches despite being in the same genre. Dragon's Dogma has a fairly drab and straightforward, extremely conventional art style to Amalur's beautiful approach courtesy of Todd McFarlane. Dragon's Dogma has a ton of freedom in allowing you to explore, where Amalur doesn't even let you jump on your own and will block you from moving past shen-high obstacles. Where Dragon's Dogma's story is, at least in my opinion, downright weird and not very well done, Amalur has a pretty decently told, and at least in my opinion, occasionally entertaining story. Also, Amalur has normal fast travel, which felt like more of my playtime was actually spent interacting with the characters and objectives set for me rather than pointless wandering. So at the end of the day, I think both combat systems are different enough to not really say one is definitively better, but I did marginally enjoy Dragon's Dogmas a little more, even if busting out my own handcrafted Vyron's Blade was pretty damn satisfying. The two games are so different in their approach to what is otherwise the same genre that it's actually pretty remarkable. I tend to muse to myself that if you took the best from both games, you would probably have one of the definitive action RPGs. Probably the only other thing that could really be improved is the story. I found Amalur's much more entertaining than Dragon's Dogma's, but it still didn't strike me as wholly original or noteworthy. I don't know. I guess I haven't heard a story like it before, but it still tends to rely on some fantasy conventions. Like, oh, they have gnomes instead of dwarves, but they basically fill in the role of dwarves, and well, sort of, I guess. And then there are elves and humans that live alongside the elves, but then the elves aren't immortal. The Fae are, but the Fae look a lot like the elves and are still noticeably different, but they look like elves, and I think you get my point here. It's still very much in the realm of Tolkien-inspired fantasy. So if there's any 2 points I didn't particularly like about the game, rough edges aside, it's that, for one, as big as the world was, it felt very sectioned off, and my approach to each new area was the same. Wander around the perimeter, filling in all the fast travel points, and picking up every side quest I saw along the way. For 2, being used as I was to Dragon's Dogma's approach to exploration, I found myself frustrated by how little mobility it felt like I had. Infinite sprint and fast travel are the only two things this game has over Double D on that front, though I have to admit having fast travel is more of a net positive than not being able to jump to me. Still, going from one to the other, it's hard not to notice the deficiencies one has that are the strengths of another. And this just happens to be one of those areas. It's hard to escape the feeling of missed potential here. For as good a game as it is now, with the talent behind it, including R.A. Salvatore, who wrote, as far as I know, some very famous fantasy novels, which I believe I've actually read some of. Ken Rolston, who was, I believe, the creative director behind Morrowind, and Todd McFarlane, who was the artist, I believe, behind Spawn, and who has a very distinct art style. And also Grant Kirkhope, who did the music. I guess I just would have expected a little more. In particular, Kirkhope surprised me with the opening region's rather generic fantasy theme. And even though Datier's theme I thought was actually really nice. Still, I think it's a game worth playing, and apparently the DLC is worth it too. I think if you like fantasy RPGs along the lines of the Elder Scrolls with a bit more focus on combat, you'll probably enjoy your time trekking through the Feylands. So, with all that said, I did enjoy my time playing Kingdoms of Amalur. It reminded me a lot of some of the fantasy novels that my brother had on his bookshelf, which a lot of them, I'm sure, were written by R.A. Salvatore. And it's definitely worth the price. So yeah, go ahead and I think you should check it out if you like this type of game. End of the Long Winter, Ballad of the Siegebreaker, King of the Ballads, Electric Boogaloo.